Air is a biopic that tells the story of how Nike courted Michael Jordan and essentially really shook up the industry of sports and how players interacted with these larger companies. I might not necessarily like sports, but I love sports movies. I love the inspiration that those types of movies, especially underdogs, how they just kind of make you feel like you're on top of the world. And I also love to learn things about history, especially when it comes to like the revolutionaries that you don't necessarily hear about and necessarily learn about. That's why biopics are some of my favorite genres in the medium of film. Air absolutely hits every single one of those marks. It is the inspirational, feel-good movie that you wanted to know. I got to know a lot more about Nike that I didn't know about coming into this. And I think there's a point in the movie where Sonny Vaccaro, who is played by Matt Damon in this movie, is kind of the one that's kind of leading the charge on courting Michael Jordan to join the team of Nike. He says, look, in a million years, no one in this table is going to be remembered, but you, Mike, will be. I think that's so true, because that's one of the things, like, I didn't know any of the history about this, at least not to me. Again, not a sports guy, but I learned a lot in this movie. And this movie is actually probably one of the funniest biopics I've ever seen. Typically with biopics, you find that the acting is going to be good, that it's always going to be career best performances across the board. The drama is always going to feel really, really well done. The tension that's woven in between some of the scenes is going to be really done. You're going to feel the stakes of the film, whether you know the outcome or not. And don't get me wrong, Air has all of that. I'll talk about that in a second. But it's very rare when you find a film within the biopic genre that is actually legitimately funny. Not just a couple of scenes, but funny throughout. And I think that comes from the cast, not only the main players, but also the subsidiary characters as well. I feel like I could do it like an entire video on just how good this cast is just alone. Chris Tucker absolutely stole the show for me in this movie. It's been a long time since I've seen him in anything, so it felt almost kind of like an amazing homecoming getting to see him again. This guy that I grew up with in the Rush Hour movies. He plays Howard White in this movie, and he is just absolutely hysterical. I love his chemistry and his scenes with Matt Damon, and he's just an all-around great performance in this. Obviously, the aforementioned Matt Damon obviously kills it here. I always forget about how good of an actor Matt Damon truly is until I sit down to watch one of his movies. And he's one of those actors that I feel like can do literally anything he sets his mind to. He was the best thing about Thor: Love and Thunder. He was just really hilarious in that. But then you watch him in movies like Interstellar or The Martian or Good Will Hunting, and you just kind of get to see like how good of like a dramatic actor he is. And I feel like Air really showcases his range as an actor, where when the film calls for dramatic beats, he's leading the charge on that, but also at the same time, he's also leaning into a lot of the film's best comedic moments. There's a sequence between him and Chris Messna's character, and they're just kind of talking back and forth on the phone, and it is literally the funniest scene in the film. And just Damon's delivery of the comedy really makes it that much more just effective, because I don't know about you, I essentially always look at Matt Damon as a dramatic actor because those are the kind of roles I've seen him in. So like getting to see him in a more lighter-hearted, funny film like this, and just some of the things that happen in this film really were just impressive. Other performances in this movie, Viola Davis, once again, never turns in a bad performance, and Air is another check mark to that list. Just delivers a dynamic performance. She's not in this movie very often, but the scenes that she is in, how few they may be, she makes it count, and you will remember her walking out of this movie. She's going to be leading the charge on our mental health moment at the end of this video, and just again, she has some of the most powerful scenes in this movie. She has literally probably the best monologue outside of Damon in this movie. I think Ben Affleck also gives another great performance. Jason Bateman gives a good performance in this one. Even some of the minor roles, like Marlon Wayans, why is he not doing more dramas? Because he's in this for only a handful of scenes, but much like his performance in Respect, he makes you remember him. I really loved walking out of this theater just remembering like him being one of the best sequences in this movie. The pacing of this film is immaculate. Because of the way the film flows with its comedy and drama, it never once makes it feel like the film is rushing or lagging. It's the perfect steady pace as it's telling this story of like high stakes risks and inspiration. Sometimes sports movies have these underlining underdog type storylines, and I would definitely say that Air has that aesthetic to it, and I think it really thrives in that aesthetic because even growing up in the 90s, like I knew everything about like how big Michael Jordan was. I knew how this movie ends, but yet you're still drawn to the edge of your seat because of the way that Affleck not only directs and sets up certain shots, but the way that the script is written as well. I think it handles those moments really well, and it ultimately ends up inspiring you, and it makes the ending that much more effective and heartwarming. One of the things I feel like this film does really well is how it feels like a film out of the 80s. I've seen some other critics talk about the 80s aesthetic that it brings. This movie literally opens up on the year 1984. Like, you're drawn into like news clippings, pop culture, music, commercials, sports. Like, it's just a vacuum of the early 80s, and I really appreciated that, and I really kind of thought that that would just kind of be like something that you open up on. But nope, Affleck made that decision to kind of keep that progressively throughout the film, and it makes the film feel a little bit more authentic because the cinematography around it makes it feel like it came from the 80s. The music choices, and not only the more popular songs of that era that are featured in this, but also at the same time, the very fact that the score in this movie feels like it's very synth heavy, and it feels like it belongs in an inspirational 80s movie. I think it just kind of made it feel a lot more authentic as a period piece. Sometimes especially in biopics, you kind of have the band, or you'll have the celebrity, or whatever sport, whatever story you're telling, and it only focuses on that, or like what happens to this. But this Air feels like it engrosses the entire culture around the time that this story is unfolding, and it makes it feel like the story is being told in real time, and it made it feel more authentic. Well, let's run this through the Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Air a 4 out of 5. I feel like it's a no-brainer. This movie is just absolutely incredible. It's funny, it's charming, it's inspirational. It literally encapsulates everything you want in a film. Even if you don't like sports, come for the performances, come for the comedy, come for the dramatic beats, come for the inspiration that you'll walk away with this movie. I highly recommend this movie. Now let's talk about mental health. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're talking about. Talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. As I mentioned previously, one of the best moments in this film is Viola Davis's character. She is Michael Jordan's mother. She is giving a monologue to Sonny Vaccaro in the climax of this movie, and she's talking about knowing and understanding one's worth. And I get that we are in this age of kind of being a little bit more open about our mental health. I follow a lot of people on my own personal TikTok that are very open and honest about their mental health struggles. Some of them are sincere and make, are opening up and having these conversations like we're having right now. And then some of them also are using that to demean themselves and make self-deprecating humor out of it. And I know I stress here, stay with us, like hold on till tomorrow. And one of our earliest logos and iterations was a hourglass, because the story behind that basically meant that the sands of time that are in the hourglass are the current seasons of depression that you're feeling. Hold on, because eventually it will run out. And sometimes that takes a lot longer, and sometimes in the process of those beads running out, we have this tendency to undermine our own worth. Or we compare our worth to someone on social media, or we compare our worth to the latest celebrities, or we will be worth something if we obtain a certain number of followers or a certain number of money or possessions and whatever. But the thing about it is that I love the way that Viola Davis puts it, is that understanding your worth is never selling yourself short. I'm paraphrasing, of course, because the theater would not let me pull out phones. They were not allowed. But she said something to that extent, and that's what I want to think. And so sometimes I feel like this current age of social media, that we have this tendency sometimes to sell ourselves short, or we look down upon ourselves because of XYZ, or we are not the standard of beauty or riches or a number of other things that society is trying to tell us that probably is not at all true to begin with. So stop chasing after what society tells you your worth is, and understand your worth as an individual. Understand and set boundaries for what's going to make you happy and what's going to keep you in a good mental health position. Because understanding your worth as an individual is vital to your mental health. Eventually overcoming depression, anxiety, addiction, self-harm, suicide, all of the things that we are actively raising awareness of and placing resources in the show notes below for all of that stuff. So please stay with us. Just take time to understand your beauty, understand your value, understand your worth. What makes you valuable? What makes you you? What makes you happy? Those are the things that I want to encourage and invest and chase and challenge you to chase. Because who knows? Maybe you are the next Michael Jordan-esque figure, and you understanding your value and your worth is going to make the difference in your relationships, your friendships, your marriages, the way that you parent, the relationships that you have at work, etc. I hope that's an encouragement to you, and if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, links, as one more time, are in the show notes below to our mental health resource library. Air comes out in theaters tomorrow, April 5th, and just in time for Easter. So if you guys want to get inspired, go see this movie. It is out from Amazon Studios. Click the links in the show notes below to like, follow, and subscribe to us on all of our social media platforms, podcast feeds, and Patreon as well. And hit that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Until next time, remember, stay classy.